Hello and welcome to Savepoints, cosmic lessons I've learned about life and myself by playing video games. Today I'm playing a rather strange game for which I have no explanation, due to the fact that it is a rather simple looking JavaScript game. I understand if you think you're above it, if you're that kind of person, but I wasn't and amn't. The lesson itself is rather simple and intangible. Stated simply, enjoy the game. Originally a theory that if a game has one purpose, that purpose is that it be enjoyed. Therefore, if a well-designed game exists, it is paramount that above all else the player enjoys it. It is a browser-based game called Agario, or agar.io. I don't know what it's called. Anyway, it was the worst thing to happen to me last week while I was looking for something different and free. I almost immediately lost track of time, and as my dearest memories started to fade, I became nothing more than this simple blob, this gelatinous blob of unknown diameter and of various colors. I was charged with no task. My entire world was simply surviving, avoiding getting absorbed by the other gelatinous cells, lest be given a failure condition and the all-too-ominous splash screen. As this was now my entire life, for the foreseeable future I wished only to fully appreciate it, the endless gray grid offering all the structure I needed from a world, and the small unnamed orbs providing endless sustenance and growth, with coexistencers joyfully celebrating the entire way, some small and some so giant I could not read their name. The invisible walls that kept me within Blob's reach of many of the other conscious entities in this world did not make sense, until they did, until the invisible walls became the definition of my reality, the driving factor between where I was from and where I was going, as well as a kind of strategic structure more experienced players could use to trap the newer ones, or to use as relay points to find each other if they were so fortunate to be using voice communication. The enforcers of conflict, these invisible walls, defined the part of the gray grid we were allowed to be on, and I appreciated them too. There were other options, of course, beyond simply eating and being eaten. Pressing the W key would offer a small part of myself into the world to either reunite with later or assist others in growing. It was beautiful to grow that way and to be helped in the same vein. I could also at any moment press the spacebar and split in half, a function that would create two identical and therefore faster orbs, the necessity of which escaped me completely, until I saw it. The scoreboard. It had been there looming over all of us. All the sentient gelatinous blobs, the sizes we were suddenly mattered. We were being ranked, and our purpose defined. We were not all free-floating, with all our needs met. We all now had a need that only one of us could have at a time. That need was to be at the top of this board. As usual, when presented with any form of experience points bar or ranking system, I was instantly determined and driven at all costs to destroy everything in my path. I had to grow. I would carefully avoid absorption, taking advantage of idle blobs and gunning for whatever I deemed worth the risk. My first prey would be a blob named AOEU, his name containing all vowels, save I. He must have at some point split or been split, and I would move in between him and himself in a weakened state. His larger cell slowing these smaller ones down, I easily absorb some of his power, and as he tries to defend himself, he splits voluntarily, only to realize his halves were now even easier to absorb. This act replaces his name with mine on the scoreboard. I was blob-thirsty now. I would need as much as I could gather. I would flee such predators as Score and the police, and avoid being baited by the aggressive and high-ranking Poland. I took advantage of an orange blob who was fleeing a series of predators, and I continued to chase smaller entities when I found it convenient. Eventually I would conquer the police, rocketing me up into third place. I would battle with a Doge over a different, smaller Doge, strategically relocating as he became the biggest entity in the world, an entity that, in spite of his size, I could actually fathom and perceive almost in its entirety for the first time. He would soon fall too, but even as I took everything I couldn't help but notice I was falling at a rate faster than I was growing. My place on the scoreboard was constantly in flux. There was no pride in maintaining fifth. As if he knew my goals, the former superior Score suddenly started to help increase my size. I would give back, but only amidst advancing level merging strategies. I would split to conquer half of Doge, who would submit completely, my absorption of these two placing me in second. I started to find help in unexpected places. Tiny blobs like feminism and this guy, a blob so small I could not even read his name anymore. I was appreciative, but I did not know what else to do. I needed to keep growing, and all I saw were means to do so. I would reform as a giant body, and almost immediately thereafter split attack Alphen, who I would miss by a small margin in spite of my assumed superiority. As I soaked in the small defeat and planned my next mode of attack, I realized I had been in first place. I had achieved it. I was the best. I was the best blob. No one could contest it, but I hadn't even noticed. I felt no significant difference. I still had threats surrounding me, trying to take me down, and I was actively searching for more prey as my size was depleting with every second. There was no visible change aside from from the fact that now some coexistencers from my past were small and uninteresting as the plentiful food once was. The only big difference was that my name was next to a number, and although that number won, I knew I didn't get there alone. I owed this success to Score and the Doges, and the unnamed orange blob, and feminism, and the purple dot whose name I couldn't read, but the value of the success did not resonate. I only knew to continue to try to hold on to what I had while taking as much as I could, to be big, lest to become mine and everyone's worst fear. Small again. Suddenly a blob named K-pop fan would use most of his mass on one of the green mines, using the W key to fire off as much of himself as necessary to inject the green mine into my secondary blob orb, shattering it. As I struggled to develop a strategy to escape from now what seemed an entire blob army who had been biding against time, I shatter again, and I watch in rather silent resolve as AOEU splits, his vowel collection complete. I am gone. Waking up from my trance-like state, I realized I was just inhabiting a character. I was simply piloting an entity with the opportunity I had been given. I had the ride from 10 to 8,480, a size big enough to grant me the top spot on the board. I needed help to get there, and when I finally did, I realized that it wasn't that much different than the place I had started. The world restricted me into these battles. The conflict was intentional, and although I had nothing left after it, I was different. I had seen it, and although the number suddenly meant much less, and the achievement confusingly empty, I realized it was not about my place on the board. Whatever that meant to me or other people, that was fleeting, and all the time I would spend searching for it would not be paid off simply by achieving it. Rather, it was the experience itself which was the only payoff, the opportunity to try, to chase, to grow, to fall, to make friends and enemies, to learn of the invisible walls and use them to team up with my friends. The whole process was what I was after, and to maximize fun and enjoyment was why I was playing a game in the first place. It never ended until it did, and on the whole it was only as fun as I let it be. It doesn't matter that this was the silliest or stupidest or worst graphics game some people had ever seen. What mattered was that I chose to enjoy the game, and you should too. My name is Gold Vision. I used the magenta orb on the white map with mass size enabled, and I hope you enjoyed this save point.